I'm basing a lot of these, what I'm calling hidden talents or abilities, around the demonstrative function. This is a concept that I've magpied from the socionics typing system. It is an unusual concept, but one I think is useful to know. A type's demonstrative function can be found by taking their second slot function and changing whether it's introverted or extroverted. So for example, for INTPs and INFPs, it's NI. The demonstrative function can be seen in a few ways. It's often described as something a type can do extremely well, but simply doesn't value as much as their other functions, specifically their second slot function, kind of akin to a talent in an area that doesn't interest you that much. It can also be thought of as an emergent function. For example, when an INTP is exploring ideas with a TI and NE, then settles on some kind of SI-like solidified concept, that narrowing down of an idea appears quite like NI in action. An ISTP going over and over something to master it in a logical and hands-on, so to speak, way kind of seems like how SI works. I've also heard it be described, as the name would suggest, as something a person feels like they need to demonstrate to the world. If they need to show people that they are succeeding, they need to do well with this function. For example, an ENTP might need to channel that TE to be more put together, structured, and organized, to bring their ideas to life. An ENFP might want to show that their weird and wonderful thoughts, ideas, and plans can be beneficial to the people around them and bring value to the group, or community, or wider audience, in that FE kind of way. The demonstrative function is also less conscious and less intentional in nature. A person will use or demonstrate this function without even realizing they're doing it, like a muscle twitch, something that's instinctive. One final point I'll make is that types often view their demonstrative function, when they see someone else really caring about it, as kind of silly, maybe even to the point of making fun of it, in their heads, or out loud, depending on your type. You could think of an INFJ seeing FI as too self-focused and self-involved, or an ENTJ seeing NE as too scattershot and unfocused. So it's a function a type is highly skilled at, but rolls their eyes at other people valuing it too much. So there's a few different angles you can tackle this from. I wanted to go over these so people know what I'm using as a launch pad for each point. It's also useful to be aware of when trying to type yourself and others, especially when you're torn between J and P versions of the same type, ESTP and ENTP, extraverted thinking. Both types will often come across to other people as untethered, chaotic, wild, independent, people who love variety, adventure, and exploration. They are not often seen as paragons of structured and well-organized lives. Like all high TI users, they want to study things and furnish their minds with whatever insights that studying yields. From that, they gain a kind of mental toolkit to use as and when the situation requires. Then they can jump into all sorts of fun scenarios and environments, knowing that they are well armed, so to speak. But ESTPs and ENTPs are exceptional organizers when they want to be. In fact, when they're adapting, reacting, and improvising, they are actually using their TE in short bursts. If you think about how effortlessly these two types can maneuver their way out of difficult situations or to navigate highly complex dynamics and outplay people, they kind of need to be exceptional with TE. And they are. It's something they'll use when they need to, and often in short bursts. If you were to ask one of these types to organize an event, they wouldn't enjoy it. But if they care enough, they'll do it brilliantly. Just on that note, if you're debating whether to ask an ESTP or ENTP you know to organize your wedding, don't. The archetype that comes to mind when imagining a fully realized, TE-wielding ESTP or ENTP is when they're in positions of leadership. Now they have to delegate to people who they deem competent. They can't be the independent agent who just figures things out on their own. They have to create systems, processes, and procedures that will enable any person to do well. So both of these types have immense organizational abilities as their hidden talent or skill. ISTJs and INTJs. Introverted thinking. How often have you seen both of these types criticize the logic of someone or a system? They will almost instinctively and flippantly point out a logical inconsistency. It's natural for them. It's like they have this intellectual critic mode that they can slip into whenever they want. But, ultimately, they don't see TI insights, which can often be very individual to the person in question, as having utility unless it's codified into a system or something that's scalable and has wider usefulness. When these two types embrace the TI way of thinking, it allows them to build their own logical systems that just exist internally, in their own minds. They don't need to externalize them in any form, or universalize them in some system, or structure, or tool, or product even. Often you'll see both of these types solve logical problems without much difficulty en route to getting things done. Again, this is where much confusion between INTPs and INTJs comes in. Both of these types have the same demonstrative function as the other's dominant function. So both of these types have a razor-sharp, logically critical mind that can pick apart anything and anyone with a piercing ease. Watching these two types solve logical problems and puzzles is kind of like seeing someone casually solving a Rubik's Cube with zero effort, then being like, no big deal. ESFPs and ENFPs, extroverted feeling. Both types will send out emotive signals. When they're in SE or NE mode, they'll be outwardly intense and animated. But when they're in FI mode, they'll be more withdrawn and reflective. This can lead to accusations of them sending mixed signals. In fact, I've lost track of the amount of times I've heard these types say that people around them think they're flirting when they're not. I've also observed this happening a lot with them. It's a real thing. I describe ESTPs and ENTPs as having roguish charm, but ESFPs and ENFPs have this too. It's that ability to juggle FI and FE depending on the situation. Although they don't necessarily dwell on it or value it that much, ESFPs and ENFPs are excellent at reading a room, often at a lightning quick speed. When they want to channel it, they're exceptionally empathetic. This is their hidden talent or ability, I would say. They can read people, their intentions, their desires, their moods, even before the person is aware of those things themselves. Both types can also affect a room or an audience in a very FE way. Any ESFP or ENFP performer demonstrates this perfectly. They bring their own individual and authentic qualities to whatever they're doing, but in a way that resonates with people. They can bridge that gap between them and an audience, even if that audience is just another person they're talking to. Think of a performer electrifying an audience and bringing them together, or a comedian rattling off hilarious insights about people and society. Although they're valuing FI, it's manifesting in some sense as a positive FE expression and experience for others. So that ability to read people and to move people in the ways they want, emotionally, is their hidden talent or ability, in my view. INFPs and INTPs. Introverted intuition. I mentioned this briefly at the beginning of the video, but although both of these types are known for the exploration of ideas, ultimately, much of their success, insight, and joy in life comes from narrowing down on a conceptual understanding of the world, or whatever they happen to be studying or pondering at any given point. So things that are associated with NI. Both of these types have the hidden talent or ability of knowing exactly where the wind is blowing, how things will play out, when people are heading down a disastrous path, or in an excellent direction, and so on. I think you often see this when an INFP or INTP character will offhandedly mention something that turns out to be an accurate prediction. Then they'll go back to exploring whatever fun possibilities they were before. I've actually seen this happen quite a lot. They'll just say, oh yeah, X or Y thing will probably happen. And it does. It's like they can collapse down other people's ideas to singularities, but don't like to commit to that narrowed down approach themselves. Through their investigations and philosophizing, they'll pick up on recurring patterns, which they will, tentatively, let solidify in their minds as principles or insights. These tend to be remarkably accurate, but they kind of devalue them in some ways as well. NE always wants more, kind of akin to wanting to know the answer to a magic trick, but secretly hoping that you never get it. Because if you do, the magic is gone. At the very least, they love it when their answers to puzzles or problems lead to more questions. ISTPs and ISFPs. Introverted sensing. If someone were to be too wrapped up in the small details of something and worrying about that, then ISTPs and ISFPs would just tell them to get on with it and take action. Again, it's that devaluing of SI compared with SE, despite the fact that both these types can use SI excellently. Both of these types are capable of being astonishing with details. This ability of theirs to be exacting about minute aspects of their work or craft is often hidden because they don't broadcast it. The intricacy and specificity that these two types display in the things they do will rival any SI Dom. This capacity to be masters of the little facets and subtleties of the skill or art form they're demonstrating kind of gets masked by their desire to be impactful with it. The SE force hides the SI subtlety, if you want to think about it that way. High or valued SI users like to get into flows of comfort, either for the sake of pure enjoyment or as a weapon to be practical, productive, and successful via their strong routines and habits. ISTPs and ISFPs can also demonstrate that SI sense of balance, homeostasis, and regulating things in a finely tuned way, but they prefer the intensity of SE. They will more often seek out new sensory experiences or push themselves, even if that means tolerating discomfort. In fact, they can oddly enjoy discomfort, kind of like when they're in battle with the environment or have to put up resistance to something. Like all high SE types, they like situations that force them to react. ENTJs and ENFJs. Extraverted intuition. ENTJs and ENFJs are seen as charismatic and charming, usually respectively. Their speedy minds and rapid wit come across as, and probably are, these types demonstrating their NE. I think that both of them can actually mistype as high NE users for that reason. Both of these types are excellent idea generators. Just get them into a brainstorming session and you'll see this in full flow. However, both types would rather zoom in on an idea and fully see it grow and see it through than spend too much time in the ideational phase. You'll also notice that they don't volunteer their ideas and plans in the same way that an ENTP or ENFP would. ENFJs and ENTJs tend to want to actually do them first and foremost. That might be a product of their NI and SE being balanced. I also think their ability to channel NE makes them great at being bantering conversationalists and good at arguing and teasing as well. So both of these types have immense creative, ideational, and innovative skills as their hidden talent or ability. I think these two types use NE the most pragmatically. They can easily generate possibilities and simulate potential outcomes and alternatives, but they find it weird when someone doesn't simply just put the best suggestions into practice. Dwelling in that speculative space holds very little interest for them. You see them use their NE a lot when they're forging down some path. If they encounter a roadblock, they will dip into their NE and find some creative solution or way around it, but then carry on with that NI path that they value more. ESFJs and ESTJs. Extraverted sensing. Both of these types have SI as a second slot function, so it's something they greatly value and use often. SI is a careful function. It likes to proceed on firm footing. It dislikes too much chaos and uncertainty, and in general is a function that enjoys a strong level of control. Both of these types might look upon the SE approach to things as reckless, impulsive, and risky. However, both ESFJs and ESTJs, when you actually observe their behavior, often jump into things with complete confidence that they'll be able to figure stuff out on the fly. If you think about it, you very rarely see these types hesitate, fail to pull the trigger on something, or struggle with inertia. So channeling that SE mindset is something they often do. When someone lives in that SE way all the time though, they disapprove of it. So both of these types have an exceptionally forceful, bold, action-oriented, and adaptable nature as their hidden skill or ability. This is often concealed by the impression, or just the reality, that they have their lives well put together and organised. INFJs and ISFJs. Introverted feeling. When these two types see big and dramatic expressions of FI, it can bug them, depending on the scenario. As a general rule, and I stress the word general, INFJs and ISFJs will bend to accommodate whatever vibe best fosters cohesion between people. That also involves being harsh with people who disrupt that aim. However, in a kind of meta way, this attachment to harmony, unity, community, and cultivating strong relationships is in itself a value of theirs, one that they are endlessly expressing and living by. When you ask them to justify their actions and behaviours, their reasoning will sound like someone defending a deeply held value. Also, since these two types are very much attuned to how people might respond and react to things, in those moments when they want to create something imbued with their own personal experiences, values, principles, beliefs, etc., they can communicate those and get them across excellently. There is a side of these two types, though, that can sometimes be overlooked. It's their one-on-one power. I think both types find themselves in the role of therapist, confidant, and advisor often. Both types are very non-judgmental. They can understand, accept, and empathize with the individual beliefs and values of each person they're dealing with, even when they disagree with them. So contrary to the usual stereotype of them suppressing the individual in favor of the group, they also have the hidden, or perhaps quieter, talent of deeply respecting, understanding, and encouraging people to live authentically and be themselves. All things I associate with FI. It's always risky to add this level of nuance and detail to a typing system, but sometimes I think it's worthwhile just to show how each type can act counter to their usual way of being, and display the full range of behaviors and motivations behind them. If you want to be demonstrative in your love for me, then subscribe to the channel. Also, feel free to find me on my various other social media using the links below.